So as you can tell, we have Sash Mackinnon. I'd never seen his face until I Skyped him last night, and it was great. I first heard about Sash thanks to I think it was the Indie Games blog. They posted a review of this silly game called Chaos Invaders, and I thought I'd use a neat font, and it looked kind of 8-bit, which is totally up my alley. So I played it, and I thought, man, the music is really catchy, and the game is really fun. That's kind of neat. Checked out his webpage, and I was his Twitter follower, and that was pretty exciting. Eventually, with the whole Games Club thing, I wondered if this guy over in Australia would be interested in talking to us, because he seems like a down to earth guy who's got a bunch of games under his belt. He has a blog too, where he's been really open about his game development process, and he's talked about some of the funding that you can expect to get if you choose to go into indie games and taking it seriously and putting a Flash game up there for auction. But he just seems like a really nice and open guy. So I think we're pretty happy to have Sash Mackinnon here all the way from Australia. So thank you for coming, Sash.
Yeah, well, that's a way better introduction than I could ever give myself.
We got it on tape though, so it's good.
Sorry. So, can everyone hear me and stuff?
Yep. Yeah, I think you sound good here.
Yeah. All right. So the way that I was thinking of doing it is I'll just tell you briefly about what I do. And in fact, I'd love to know what you guys do. If anyone has done any games or anything, like that would be awesome to just talk about to begin with. And then what I'm thinking is, I'll at any time just interrupt me and with questions and stuff, because I want to know that I'm answering questions that you guys have instead of just talking mindlessly. But I'll tell you a bit about like the games I've made, how long I've been making it, how you can actually make money out of Flash games, and just what I've been doing. So does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So has anyone actually had any games they've finished and like put up on the interwebs for publishing and such? Yeah?
We've had
some finished games.
Yeah, we've had some finished games, but not distributed, not sold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some have been done.
All right, cool. So basically where it all started for me was probably like 1.5, 2 years ago. My friend came up to me and said, "Hey, dude, I found this website called Flash Game License." Hold on, I'm just getting a pretty bad echo. Maybe Scott, you're right.
Oh, okay. We'll.
All right. Did you mute me?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I muted it there, and I said, "Can you hear me?" And you didn't respond. So, we're gonna go with that. So I'll mute it again, and I'll unmute it when we have something to say.
Awesome. Yeah. If
Okay.
anyone has any questions, I'll do it right away.
Will do.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, basically 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, my friend said, "Dude, I found this website called Flash Game License, and it's a website where you can upload your Flash games, and you'll have sponsors bidding on them, and basically you can get money for making these Flash games." And I was like, "That sounds fucking awesome. I would love to be making money from games." And I'd done a little bit of Flash work before that. I hadn't really made any games, but I maybe dabbled in high school a little bit. So it became my mission to make money off a Flash game. And my friends and I then started out developing these games. And the first game that I made, I got halfway through and it was just rubbish. Like I scoped it way too big, and it wasn't fun for the right reason. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start with something really easy to do. And on my website, there's this game, Spectacular Voyage. And basically all it is it's kind of like asteroids, where these shapes come down and push your little ship to the bottom of the screen. And you have to avoid them so you don't hit the bottom of the screen. If you hit the bottom of the screen, you die. And it's all physics-based. And it's so simple that I actually used the Box 2D renderer. Like, I didn't even do any graphics. It was just all the debug rendering from Box 2D, which is a Flash physics library. So I did that. I put in some like nasty comments when you lost and uploaded it to this website. It took me maybe a month or two to part-time. Like I've been a student this whole time. So like a month or two to get it out. And yeah, it did really well. I got a couple of bids. I ended up selling it for $2,500 US. And since then, I've sold additional licenses for probably a total of another 2,000, maybe a bit less. So I mean, for the work that I put into it, it was definitely worth it. It was an awesome experience, and I found out that, it's actually feasible to be making Flash games and making indie games for a living. Since then, I did Mr. Runner. That was my second one, which took a bit longer. Chaos Invaders. I've done a whole bunch of 48-hour games, and basically, I've been able to fund myself through university just by making these little games. So that's sort of where I'm up to. I don't know, does anyone have any questions or anything at this point?
If anyone has a question, feel free to just throw your hand up. Does anyone want to gasp? We did laugh and we did gasp in awe when you said those numbers. Just with the microphone on, you might not have heard that, but
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what I'll do as well is give you a rough idea of how much you can make. Spectacular Voyage made probably about 3,000 or 4,000 in total. Mr. Runner made a lot more. I sold a regular license for 10,000, and then on top of that, I've sold additional licenses, probably up to about 16,000. And then Chaos Invaders made a little bit less because I think it was a bit more experimental, and sponsors sort of want to choose games which they know will be really good. So Chaos Invaders is probably up to about 2,000 in total. And then I made this little game, Pathos, which you can play on my blog, which I haven't actually released yet, which made 500, and that was a 48-hour game. So it's totally feasible to make quite a bit of money from these games. And the best thing is, like, you're working for yourself, you're working part-time, whatever hours you want. Like, I got up at, I don't know, it's 12 my time, and I got up probably half an hour before this. And you can work as late as you want, you can do whatever you want. It's total creative freedom. And it's like the best job. The only and then I'll get into this a bit more later on, but the difficult thing is actually doing it. Like, sitting down and making the time a day and making progress every day is the toughest bit. I think that's a whole nother subject area. If you guys want any details about like Flash game license or about developing a Flash or anything, or the numbers, like, ask me now. While we're on that topic. Do you guys have any questions? No?
Ted?
Yeah. I forget the terms you were using, but you said something about full license game. You were selling full licenses versus something else. What did you mean there?
All right. Yeah. Okay. So basically, when you sell a Flash game, there's two types of licenses you can sell. The way it works is you have sponsors like Congregate, Armor Games, Newgrounds, all those big Flash game websites, and they want to put their logo in your game, because by doing that, when the game distributes to the web, people are going to click on that logo being like, oh look, Newgrounds made this, which is a total lie, but they'll go back to Newgrounds as... Sorry?
Oh, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right, I just thought that might be a question. Yeah, so then people click on Newgrounds link or Armor Games link, and they get more traffic, they get more users, and people click on the ads on their site, and they get a whole bunch of money. So that's how the money comes into it. So what they do is you have a main sponsor, which puts their logo in your game, and every version of that game around the web will have that logo. Then you have secondary sponsors, and they say, okay, we don't want that logo in our game, but we'll put our own logo in the game, and it will only be on our site. So basically, they just don't lose the traffic. So by combining those two sponsorship methods, you can have one big sponsorship and then a series of smaller sponsorships. Yeah, if you go onto flashgamelicense.com, it's got like all the information you need about all this kind of thing. And it's really, really easy once you have a game to just upload and do a day or two of research and reading and just learn how to sell and make money off these games. I can give you a couple of good sites. Maybe at the end of it, I'll send out an email with the good sites that I use for researching this kind of thing. But yeah, it's does that answers the question? Yeah.
So I have a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Can you explain what the bidding process is like when you put a game up that you've craft it to your heart's content, and you put it up on this site. How long does it take, and what's it like sort of sitting behind the computer watching people talk about you and your product in that sense?
It's super stressful because what happens with all games is you make it, and especially when you're doing it from home and you're not testing it and you don't have a team or anything, you make it and you end up being really good at it, so you have no idea how people are going to play it for the first time. So what usually happens is you upload it, and then you have a whole bunch of 13-year-olds who are doing the beta testing raging at you, being like, this game sucks, I can't control, what does it even do, blah, 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 blah. And so you have to sort of sift through all that horrifying feedback to try to find out what's actually going wrong. So that's the first stage of it, which is actually making it playable, which is more difficult than it sounds, actually. And the thing about Flash games is, you know, you can't really put in instructions. Like, when was the last time you played a Flash game and read a page of text explaining how it works? Like, you never do that. People just try and play it, and if it doesn't work right away, they'll just close the window. There's such a low level of investment. So you really have to try and find this balance of how... Sorry, no window enough. Yeah, so basically, how to get the people to stay and play, but also how to explain to them all the mechanics in your game. So that's the first step. The second step is you open it up to sponsorships. And it's really super nerve-wracking because some games, like Mr. Runner, was total success. Like, within the first couple of hours of opening it, I had a bid for 1,000 something, and then it just kept going on, and then there was this huge bidding war, and then it was part of their newsletter, so then all these other sponsors came on, and they just kept bidding and bidding and bidding until it finally reached the maximum bid. And that was really cool. But then Chaos Invaders, for example, which I really liked, I put it up there, and it just sat there. I didn't get any views, and I sent out all these emails and stuff, and people were looking at it a bit, but then not buying it, and it was just, like, it's so nerve-wracking. Eventually, I got, I think I got a sponsorship for $200, and that was the first bid, and I was like, what is this? Because I just sold Mr. Runner recently for like 10,000, and I was like, how, $200? I put my, like, 1 month of my life into this. But eventually went up, and it went up to, I think, 1,500, which is where it's sort of capped. But I think the thing about games is, if you're doing it just for the money, then that process will destroy you, and you'll quit, and you'll never want to open Flash again. But if you're doing it because you love making games and because you have so much fun making games, then it's awesome. Like, even though Chaos Invaders sold for such a small amount, probably didn't cover itself, I still totally loved it. Like, it's still, it was worth for me every hour I put into that game. So basically, it's really super nerve-wracking, but you get kind of used to it. And yeah, my most recent game, Pathos, which is just like a small, really slow 48-hour game I did, I uploaded, and I was like, I don't even know if I should upload it, should I just release it? So I decided to, and I didn't spend any time on it. Like Chaos Invaders, I would have spent hours and hours sort of publicizing it and stuff and trying to get some views. But with this, I just put it up there and was like, whatever. And it's still got $500, which is, what, like half Chaos Invaders. So, yeah, that's kind of what the process is like. It's super nerve-wracking, but it's definitely worth it. Yeah,
That's great. That's great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, are there any other questions? Yeah?
So, would you recommend putting a lot of time into a game, or because you made it sound like just kind of cranking one out got you quite a bit of money? I know you're not doing it for the money, but what would you recommend?
Okay, so basically,
how much time should you spend on a game before it becomes kind of a, I don't want to say a waste of time, but you should probably start working on something else?
Okay, that's a really good question. So basically, when you're doing your first game, try to spend as little time on it as possible. Because what can happen is, if you have this feature creep, you'll end up spending way too much time on it. You'll get halfway through and be like, this is what I wanted. You know, maybe, like, I've got a whole bunch of friends who wanted to make their first game like an RPG, and they had all these cool open world mechanics. It's like, that's not going to work, man. So what you have to do is totally for your first game, totally scale down. Give yourself like 2 weeks to get it out. Work out the absolute minimum mechanics, because what will happen is there'll be so much work in making that bare minimum fun. Like there's, for example, Chaos Invaders. Like it's such a simple game. It's all it is like really to actually make the the engine for it. It took me like a couple of hours. I would have spent maybe a day tops getting all the level systems and the guys and the mechanics in place. And then I spent like a month just polishing it, getting all the music and the feel right, putting in all like nice little screen shakes, designing all the levels, getting the bosses in, making everything feel really juicy. So the thing is, there's so much more work than you expect in places where you don't expect it. So basically, first game, scale down like hell. Aim to do as small amount of work as possible, and you'll still have a lot of work to do. So yeah, just try and keep it as simple as possible. And then once you've done that, you'll learn a lot about it, and you'll learn to scope a lot better, and then you can scale up from there. So it's kind of like a gradual process. Take baby steps into it. Just give you an example of how long games took. Spectacular Voyage took me like a month and a half, maybe 2 months. This is all part-time, by the way, so this is working on it like maybe 10, 20 hours a week. And then Mr. Runner took me about 4 months. Chaos Invaders took me 2 months. Pathos took me 48 hours. And then Mr. Runner 2 has taken me just so long. Like I've just put so much time into polishing it and making the controls work and getting everything perfect. That's kind of an example of a game where I've just been like, you know what? I don't care how long this takes me. I'm going to make this game as good as I can. So that's been going for like, I don't know, 6 months already. It's not done. Yeah, so that's the best advice I can give. Just do something and do something really simple and make it fun. Yeah, awesome. Any other
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Do you do your games from scratch in ActionScript, or do you use like Pepper libraries like Flixel, say?
Oh yeah. So I started developing games from scratch, and I also did a whole bunch of I've done a whole bunch of Flash stuff for website companies and things like that. So basically, I've built up my own sort of pseudo library. I've actually taken a whole bunch of stuff from Flashpunk and just ripped it out. Like I don't use the main world. Like Flashpunk has a whole bunch of rendering and world and entity stuff, but what I do is just take the stuff I want and sort of put it into my code. But Flashpunk, and I think the thing is, learning Flashpunk is different to learning Flash, because it just gives you different ways to do things. So Flashpunk is probably easier, and I prefer Flashpunk to Flixel, but some people prefer Flixel to Flashpunk. But so it's a really good place to start with those two, because you can sort of just dive right into it. But once you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty control, like Mr. Runner 2, I don't think there's any way I could have done that just using Flashpunk and Flixel. I would have had to rewrite a whole bunch of it. So yeah, basically start out with whatever will make your life easiest, like Flashpunk, Flixel, and then go down further and further into your own code once you get better at it. Yeah.
How long do you do with your own game testing? Like you play on your own game?
Because I play when you're debugging a game. So when basically my workflow goes like this, I'll add a little feature, or I'll be making a level in whatever I am, like Mr. Runner, and then I'll play it for about 10 minutes, and then I'll do like 5 minutes work, and then play it for 10 minutes and do 5 minutes work. It's the easiest thing to get caught up doing. It's so it's just really, really easy to play your game way too much. So and the other thing is I never really sit down and have like a month or a week where I will play test things. It's sort of a gradual process as I'm designing. But yeah, the problem with that is that you get, like I said before, you get so good at your game. Like I am just so intensely good at Mr. Runner now because I've been doing it for so long that it makes it almost impossible for me to know what normal people will be like at the game, right? So that was part of the problem with Mr. Runner 1, is that I was making these levels and I was like, oh, these easy levels are so boring, no one's going to like them. And so I made all these hard levels and the game just ended up being super difficult from the outset. And just because I was so good at it. And even now, like I come back to Mr. Runner 1 and I'm like, man, this game is so hard. So it's something you're really got to be careful of. And you can't test your own games, really. Because you are too good at them. You have a whole bunch of preconceptions. You're like, no, this is there, like this mechanic is there for this reason, even though people might not understand that. So yeah, basically you make the games, you don't test them. Yeah. So yeah.
About tweaking your game, like how long did you spend? Like, do you have an idea of what Mr. Runner 2 was gonna feel like jumping and stuff? Because it's really, you can see it's really like specific.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a whole big world of tweaking that I did on Mr. Runner. Like, there's so much to talk about in terms of actually getting the controls right. In fact, I gave like a little presentation about it a while ago, and it went for like an hour. There's just so many little nitty-gritty things that you wouldn't expect. Like making something, and Scott and I were talking about this before, making something feel good and feel natural is like the least natural thing ever. I've got so many if-then cases. I've got just like the player code is what took me the longest to write, and even longer than writing like the tile engine and stuff like that. Yeah, so basically when I sat down to write the controls, the first thing I did was played my favorite platformers and worked out what I liked about the controls. So at that time it was Yoshi's Island. I did a bit of Meat Boy. Super Meat Boy came out after that, and that really heavily influenced Mr. Runner 2 because I love that game. I've A+'d everything, including all the Dark World, which I'm so proud of. So yeah, just played all the games which I felt were sort of on par with Mr. Runner, and wrote down everything that I really liked about them, wrote down why I felt like what was making me feel good when I was playing, and then sort of took those concepts and translated them into gameplay essentially. So I worked on, like for example, in Mr. Runner 1 and 2, you have a really long jump, like you float almost. And the reason for that is because in Yoshi's Island, you could do this thing where you jump really, you do a jump and then you'd have like a little hover time, and it would really let you be specific about where you landed. So it would mean that you have full control over exactly where you would want to land on the map. And in Mr. Runner, I really like that, and I wanted you to just be like boom, boom, and be able to time your jumps perfectly. And so that's sort of where that floaty jump came from. And there's there's lots and lots of other little things that I did, like Mr. Runner 2. I was telling Scott about this before. If you hit space just before you hit the ground, you'll still jump. And just things like that make such a huge difference. Yeah, so tweaking controls and gameplay, I would say first look at the games that you love which are similar. Never just go into it by yourself. Never think that, like, it's always really useful to build off what other people have done and done right. And then once you've done that, there'll be a whole series of tweaking and trying to understand what's fun and what's not fun and getting that whole balance right. Yeah.
Question on
that? If there are any more questions, there's just some other things that
Sure. Yeah. Sash, I have one more follow-up question I have to ask.
Yeah.
So you talked about, you're obviously really knowledgeable about games and talking about mechanics in that sense. You've done a lot of thinking about it. And when you jumped into, for example, when you jumped into Flash Game License, was that the start of your experience as a programmer, or what's your experience both in playing games and in coding?
Okay, so I'm just finishing up a computer science degree, so I will be a professional coder. But I don't really like coding that much. So I did a whole bunch of C and a whole bunch of Java, but really I only know ActionScript. I've sort of forgotten all the other languages just because I don't like it. So I don't like to think of myself as a programmer. I just like to think of programming as a tool I use to make things, right? So before getting to Flash Game License, I'd had a bit of experience with Flash through high school, just doing some basic scripting stuff. And then my friend was actually teaching me ActionScript 3 at the time. And if you know someone that knows ActionScript 3, it's awesome just to sit down with them, have them walk you through a little bit of code so that you can get a general feel for it. Because the hardest thing about programming is starting, and the hardest thing is trying to work out what the hell internal function means when you don't have someone to tell you. So yeah, that was my experience with coding. In terms of games, I remember specifically when I was 6 years old and I got my Super Nintendo, and I was playing Yoshi's Island, and I was so curious about how they managed to make Yoshi move on the screen, and I was like, holy crap, they must have drawn like every single frame that you could possibly be in. And like since then I've been like, man, this is what I want to do, and I was always trying to figure that out, and I was always trying to like I always wanted to do that. So sort of through high school and through primary school, I'd sit down with big sheets of paper and just design these Yoshi's Island levels and these Mario levels. So yeah, I mean, going into Flash games, I guess, was sort of just a natural progression of that. I've never been. I think the games that I make are the games that I want to play. So I've never really been a big fan of 3D RPGs. Like I just don't have the attention span to get into them. So all my friends were frothing over Fallout 3, and then I tried to play it and just couldn't get into it. I know that makes me a terrible person, but yeah. So basically, I play the games. I make the games that I love to play, and I think that's an awesome attitude to have. Like if you make games that you think should exist and you think should be a part of the world, and that other people should play because you like it, that's the best way to approach game development. Never go in saying like, oh, I'm going to make this generic Flash game A because it's going to make me money. Like that's just going to totally ruin you, and you're going to be stuck with this game that you don't even like, trying to make money off it, but you don't know how to make it fun. You don't even want to because you hate it. So yeah, I mean, that's basically my brief history of game design and programming.
That's perfect. And then is that going to follow into when you finish your degree into a career as an indie gamer, or do you have do you want to do that on the side or as a main focus?
So there's a couple of things. This is kind of going to get a bit off topic in terms of indie games, but basically I really like making games, and I see myself doing that for the rest of my life. So what I'm hoping to do is, like, I've got a couple of things I want to do. I'm actually going to come over to Vancouver, a family over there, and a couple of friends in the game design industry. So I was thinking, I could get a job in the industry and then just see how that goes. But then I was like, well, then I'll just be working for someone, and really I'm in a better position now. So that's kind of a hard toss-up. Like, do I go into the industry where I'll have lots of experience about, setting up businesses and working in teams and and working to deadlines? Or should I just continue doing what I'm doing now, which is awesome, and I have full creative control, but it's not really going anywhere. So that's sort of one train of thought. And then the other thing that I was thinking of doing is, my friends and I right now are actually working on this iPhone app, and it's a game, but it's sort of a twist on a game. It's basically, what we're doing is creating Foursquare, but where you check in with your friends. So it's sort of like a social networking app where when you see someone, you can check in with them, you can get badges, and there are quests to check in with certain people at certain locations, and do cool things. So we've been going all out with that, and I just want to see how that goes. I mean, that's something I also really love. So I mean, right now it's sort of all up in the air, but definitely, no matter what happens, I'm going to be making games, even if it just means I'm making more Flash games because they're really easy and really fun. So it's going to be a big part of my life.
That's awesome, perfect. And I think I muted that, right? Did I
Sorry?
mute that? Oh yeah, I muted that. Yeah, if you want us to cut out that secret part of the video before it gets stolen by the tens of millions of people who follow our videos online, let me know. We don't want to steal your idea. But no, that's perfect, Sash. Thanks.
Cool.
So does anyone have any questions before we move on? All right, it's all yours, Sash.
Yeah. All right. I mean, tell me if this is or isn't interesting to you guys, because if you want to hear about something different, just let me know right away. But what I was going to talk to you about is just a little bit about actually getting into the mentality where you can make games and starting out and what you need to do and what you don't need to do in terms of actually becoming a game designer. Does that sound good? Is that something you guys want to talk about? Cool.
Yes.
All right. Yes. So just show of hands, how many people are programmers or have some kind of tech? All right. And what about awesome? And what does everyone else do? Like art, design, or just game enthusiasts? Sorry, hold on a sec.
Sorry, I'll try to pan here.
Yeah.
Who does art? Who likes art? Yeah. Who's more of a programmer? Awesome. And who's more of design? Yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah.
All right, cool.
Pretty good mix.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think when programmers have it easiest because you can make a game that has crappy art or really stylized art. I mean, just look at Mr. Runner. But you can't, if you're a programmer, but you can't make a game if you're an artist and you don't have a programmer. So if you're an artist and you really want to make a game, the first thing you need to do is find someone that you work with really, really well and who can program. And also someone who is passionate and who is willing to stick with you. And it's much tougher in that situation because you might also as a programmer you have nitty gritty control over every aspect of the game, whereas an artist you don't really. Or the other thing is start learning a programming language. I mean, it's tough, and learning a programming language isn't something that's that easy to do. But if you really want to make games and if you're really passionate about it, it's totally worth it. Like Flash, it's once you get into the basics and once you can make a game, and that's probably a couple months of learning, like you have total creative freedom, and that's just so empowering. So if you're a programmer, basically you have no excuse not to be making games right now. If you I don't know what languages you guys use, but especially if you know Flash, like there is absolutely zero excuse. There are games on Flash game license that are being sold. I mean, they might be being sold for like 300, 400 bucks, but they're being made by like 16-year-olds, and the art is terrible, and it's the game's just like you would play this and be like, what the hell, I can do better than this. But the point is, these guys are actually like sitting down to make the games, and even though they suck, they're still making money off it. They're still having this creative output. So that's the one thing that you need to realize. Like, it's super easy to make a game. So many people have done it. You just have to actually sit down and start doing it. So the best way to get into that is to participate in like a game jam or Ludum Dare. Do you guys know about Ludum Dare? Yes, no? Okay. Ludum Dares are like 48-hour game competitions on the web, and they happen every like 6 months or so. And basically, I've made like 3 or 4 games just through Ludum Dares, and usually like the output of those games is much better than I would normally do in 48 hours because you just try so hard to get something done because you have this false time restraint. So if you want to get into a game, get a couple of friends together, aim to, if you're doing it in Flash, like that's obviously my area of expertise, but aim to have something that you can put up on the internet, something that you can make money off by the end of your development, and then give yourself like a week, or even if you're doing a game jam thing, 48 hours, like that's totally fine. You can aim to have something that you can put online at the end of the 48 hours. And then start off by scoping your game down. As I talked a little bit about this before, but I just can't emphasize how important that is. Work out one little thing which will be fun, like one reason that it will be fun, and just center everything around that. I mean, like Spectacular Voyage is probably the best example of that, and Chaos Invaders. It's just the reason Spectacular Voyage is fun is because it's like this physics puzzly thing. That's the one mechanic. All I needed to do was box 2D, and I could just spend a whole bunch of time polishing that and making levels. Chaos Invaders is kind of the same thing. Like it's Chaos Invaders is actually more tricky because I didn't know why it was going to be fun, and then I sort of had to figure that out. But yeah, so work out, like just scope it down. Don't try to do anything big, and just make it. Like give yourself a week and dedicate yourself to it. Don't let anything else take priority. And once you've actually gotten that out, and once you've made that game, you'll realize just how simple it is, and you'll realize where all these mistakes come into play that stop people from making games usually. You know, it's so easy to be like, oh, this isn't fun, or this, I need to put in this feature, and it's getting too far out of scope. It's not good for the reason that I thought it would be. So if you really scope that down and then just churn it out, it'll be awesome. And the other thing is, it's awesome to have people to do it with. So even if you're working, even if you're not working with someone, but you're working by yourself with other people also working by themselves, having someone, like having a weekly meetup, or having even a daily meetup, or a shared forum or something where you can post your progress is super inspiring. And that also helps tons. So yeah, I think the thing is, it's really, really, really easy to actually just get down and start making it, like, and also to make money off it. And when you're sitting around, yeah, what am I trying to say? Yeah, and like meetups like this are awesome, but really, you guys should be at home programming or making your game, right? Like, it's awesome that this kind of things happens, but you should also be coming in to show each other your games and show each other your progress and how far you've gotten if you really want to be making games. So, I mean, the other thing is, it's a big commitment. So it's like these games do take a long time to make, and there's a lot of work. Like you'll just be slaving over it if you do it for a week, probably for the entire week. And if you're doing it for 48 hours, you probably won't get any sleep. But in the end, like it's definitely worth it. And you just have to like let yourself take that plunge.
I just have a comment on that. One of the things that we've tried to say a few times with respect to starting a game is exactly, well, tell me if you think this fits with it. The first step to starting a game, if you want to be a game developer, is writing the game, and it sounds kind of cyclical, like, oh well, there's all this background I need to have, and I don't know where to start. But it's funny when you put yourself in that position where if you want to write a game, you just, like you said, you just sit down and you say, okay, well, what is the first step? Okay, well, I have to download an IDE to develop in. Okay, well. Yeah. Now that I've done that, now I have to write my first tutorial. Oh, look, I've got a window up. Oh, what's the next step? I'll put a text on the screen. You're halfway there.
Yeah.
And it can be intimidating when you say, I want to write a game, and you have Yoshi's Island or whatever it is in your head, and you say, I want to write this big game. But when you start small, and I think that's what you're trying to say, is you have very modest goals from the start. You produce something, and that something is the building block to producing something that's bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's totally true, especially what you said about you don't need any background, right? If people have preconceptions with everything they do, that they are missing some knowledge. Like I had this big talk with my girlfriend the other day because I was doing this iPhone app, and she was like, "Oh, I want to start up a business. I want to start doing like an iPhone app or something like that." And I was like, "Well, why don't you? I mean, what's stopping you?" And she's like, "Oh, you have this cool idea and you've got these connections." And I was like, "Love, I made the connections in the last couple of weeks because I started the app. Like, we were totally on the same playing field from the get-go. The only thing that's different is that you think you're different. So basically, yeah, just the first steps writing a game is exactly that, writing a game, and also making sure it's not too huge. Yeah, but that's one book that I could recommend to you guys. It's not about game design. I think the idea of game design books, it's just they don't work for me because they encourage that idea that you need to have all this knowledge to be able to make a game, which is rubbish. Like you learn from making a game. It's like riding a bike. When you start trying to learn to ride a bike, you don't read a book about riding a bike. You just get on the bike. So yeah, the one book that I would recommend you read is, and maybe some of you guys have read it, is 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, because he talks a lot about just getting things done and doing things, and the sort of mindset that you should have if you want to really, really just exactly what Scott was talking about, just have it happen and don't need to worry about all the other stuff which is going on. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not really making much sense. Read that book, it's awesome. But the thing is, you don't even need to read that book to start designing a game. You can just start right now. Start when you get home. I mean, you guys are snowed in, right? But what else are you gonna do?
Yeah. Write the game that you want to write, and then read the book, and
yeah.
Then write your second game, right?
Yeah, then write your second game. Then write your third.
I have a question, because I've been developing games like for a while. I did in high school, and I have the same sort of feelings as you. But how do you manage your time, like being at university and having courses and stuff, but still wanting to do your games in your spare time and stuff? Like do you do it in big bursts, or like do you try to spread it out with your assignments? Or?
It's kind of tough. Like my time management sucks. Like I've been working with Runner for way too long, but with university, I think it might also be the degree I'm doing. It doesn't actually require that much investment. Like I've been able to work really, really efficiently at university so that I can free up time to make games. Yeah, so basically, in fact, the thing that I did, which if you guys can do this is so awesome. Last semester, I did one like thesis project where I could do whatever I wanted. And so for that thesis project, I did Mr. Runner 2. So I spent the entire semester working on Mr. Runner 2. And I got a really good mark for it. And I didn't have to do any uni work. So it's kind of like killing 2 birds with the one stone. But yeah, I think you'll find you will always have time. And if you're spending a lot of time on uni work, it's probably because you have a lot of time to spend on uni work. So if you just give yourself less time to do your uni work in, you'll probably do it a lot quicker. And then you'll have time to free up to spend on games. But yeah. Yeah, any other
It's great.
Sorry.
I think that's good for questions for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not sure what else I can. About. I can. Have you guys played Mr. Runner 2?
Yeah, I think we spammed the mailing list with links about it. There were some comments. So one quick question about that, because you keep saying too long, just because you were talking about it. When are you going to be done?
Oh yeah. This is the problem with not scoping correctly, right? Like I thought it was going to be done January 25th, and then basically, because I'm working with 2 other people, and then I want to do more levels, and I want to make it all perfect. So it's just been taking ages and ages. So I'm really hoping I'm going to GDC in February. and Flash Game Summit, and I'm really hoping to have it completely polished off. Like I'm gonna do some cutscenes and stuff. So hopefully that will all be done in the next like month or so that I can then go there and talk to people about it in person and actually sell it and get a good sponsorship deal in person. Yeah, so hopefully within about 20 days, like I've just been working on it full time, but it's tough. I mean, it's when you sit down and you have a game at that level, it's really easy to make a game when you have to make it, right? So Mr. Runner, I don't have to do any more programming really. I don't have to do any more control tweaking or changes. So all it's left for me to do is design these levels and somehow turn it into a finished product. And finding your path doing something like that is really tricky. And you'll probably get to that stage when you're developing a game. Like you get to this point where it's all the programming's there, everything else is there, but it's not a finished game yet. And you're like, oh man, what do I have to do to make this into a game? And that's like a really tough step. And working out exactly what you need to do and what can happen is really, really, really important. So with Mr. Runner, what's left basically, I got to do some programming. Like I just put in this awesome feature where you can replay what you did. And so say I get number 1 on the leaderboards, which I'm also implementing. You guys could then click on replay on the leaderboards and see my replay of the level. So I just finished doing that, which is really cool. But mostly it's just designing levels now. And basically I sit down. I don't know if you guys watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I love that show. So I sort of open up a window of Avatar: The Last Airbender and sort of put that to the side, and then open up Mr. Runner, and then just design levels while I'm watching Avatar. But it takes ages. Like one level can take you like 3 or 4 hours, even though they're like that short. But just making sure all the jumps work and it's all polished and stuff. Yeah. So hopefully get it out in the next 20 days.
That's awesome. And you just, because you talked about it quickly, are you going to go for a direct sponsorship? You said you're going to try to get one in person. Don't talk about any numbers or anything. You're not obliged to, but you think that's a better decision for you to try and find someone in person?
I'm still going to put it on Flash Game License, but I'm going to be talking to all the guys who rock up Flash Game Summit and just be like, hey man, like, have you heard of Mr. Runner? It's this, and being able to sell it in person instead of just being one of 100 emails in an inbox is going to be way more powerful, I hope. And also, like, it's just way more polished than any game I've ever done. I just spent so much time putting all the little things like the motion blurs and like all the graphics and all that kind of thing. It's just, yeah, so fingers crossed. But we'll see how it goes.
Fingers very crossed. I can definitely agree to that. So, and just quickly as well, I know Minecraft recently got $10 million. Are you going to also get $10 million for Mr. Runner 2? That's the goal?
Minecraft is the exception. Minecraft is the only indie game which has done spectacularly. And I think a lot of people now see like Minecraft, like, oh man, I'm gonna make an indie game now, but it doesn't work like that. Yeah, so no, roughly I'm aiming for around 30,000 in sponsorship. That's my fingers crossed number. And I mean, we'll see how it goes. The thing about Flash Game License is if you have a bad game or an average game, it won't get that much. But if you have a really, really, really good game, it's going to get a lot. Like Steam Birds, which came out pretty recently, got almost $60,000 in sponsorships, which is incredible. And it's just like, it just goes to show that if you can really put the work into a polished Flash game, it will pay off. But a halfway done game doesn't have those kinds of results.
Yeah. Well, so you talked. Oh, do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah. You said you were working with 2 other people. Is one of those people working on sound effects or music or something, or is that something you do yourself?
No. My music is like the music in Mr. Runner 1, so loud. This guy is amazing. He did the music for Chaos Invaders, and he's done the music for both Worlds and Mr. Runner, and it's just like he's so good at it. And it's just been so good working with him. Like every once in a while, you'll find these people who are just super passionate about what they do, and are also really good at working with you. Yeah. So yeah. There's also an artist on board, and the artist is really, really cool. Like he's just been so good, and he's one of those people that will just work 10 hours a day to get it out and make stuff which just blows my mind. I've got no idea how he makes it look so good. So yeah, those are the two people I'm working with.
Sell your game.
Sorry.
So when you sell your game and they both worked on it, how does that work economically?
Oh, right. So it's basically business, like you split equity. So my artist is getting, I think, 30%. My sound designer is getting between 10 and 20% based on how much. We sort of have a model based on how much it ends up selling for. And I'll get 50%. And I don't think that's quite even in terms of our workload. Like I put a lot more work into it than they have. But at the same time, it feels to me like it's worth it just because having these guys on board has made the game just that much more polished and just that much more, that much better. So, and it also means I can work again with them in the future. So yeah.
More on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we might be pretty much out of questions, and thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. All right, thanks for having me, guys. That's awesome.
All right, thanks again, Sash. That was great.